What if the worst thing a footballer ever did and the greatest thing a footballer ever did happened 4 minutes apart? From the same boots on the same afternoon? On June 22, 1986, in the thin, white-hot air of the Estadio Azteca, one man cheated the world with his fist. And then, before the outrage had even cooled, ran 60 meters past half of England to score what people still call the greatest goal ever made. Keep those two goals in your head, because by the end you'll have to decide whether they cancel each other out, or whether together they are the whole truth of him. This is the story of Diego Maradona and the 4 minutes that made him a god and a villain at once. To understand the 4 minutes, you have to understand the man and how much one nation had loaded onto his shoulders. Diego Maradona came out of Villa Fiorito, one of the poorest barrios on the edge of Buenos Aires. A boy who could do things with a football that looked like a trick of the eye. He was short and low to the ground, built like a barrel, with a left foot that seemed to have the ball on a string, and a balance that let him ride tackles that should have cut him in half. By his teens, he was a sensation. By his early 20s, he was the most expensive footballer on the planet, carrying the hopes of a country that treats the game as something close to a religion. He had gone to the 1982 World Cup in Spain as the great young hope, and it had ended badly. Kicked black and blue by defenders who had no other way to stop him, and finally sent off, frustrated, as Argentina went out. He came home with a lesson burned into him, that brilliance alone would not be allowed to win. That he would have to be cleverer and more ruthless, as well as more gifted than everyone else on the pitch. By 1986, he was at his absolute peak, the captain, the talisman, the one man an entire team was built to serve. Argentina were not the favorites in Mexico. With Maradona, they did not need to be. Because for one tournament, he decided he would simply carry them himself. And there was something else in the air around this Argentina side that no one in the squad needed to say out loud. Only 4 years earlier, in 1982, Argentina and Britain had fought a brief, bitter war over the islands. The British call the Falklands and the Argentines call the Malvinas. A conflict that cost hundreds of young lives on both sides and left a wound that had barely begun to close. By the time the World Cup draw sent Argentina toward a quarterfinal against England, everyone understood that this would be far more than a football match. For a grieving Argentina, it was the most charged 90 minutes imaginable. Maradona himself would later admit that whatever anyone said before kickoff about it being only a game, in their hearts the players knew it was not. So when the two sides finally walked out onto that baking pitch, the question was no longer whether Maradona would crack England open. It was how and what it would cost. So the two teams walked out into the Azteca on the 22nd of June, into a wall of noise and heat and history. England arrived with a settled, organized side and a goalkeeper, Peter Shilton, who was among the very best in the world. A tall, commanding presence who had spent a career making forwards feel small. They had a clear plan for Maradona: crowd him, double him, never let him turn. For more than an hour, it half worked. The first half stayed goalless, a tense, cagey, bad-tempered thing. Both sides feeling the occasion, the ball bouncing awkwardly on a dry, worn pitch, the sun pinning everyone down. But you could feel the match straining against itself. Maradona kept dropping deep to find the ball, kept trying to wriggle into the small spaces England left him, and every time he touched it, the whole stadium leaned forward. The English defenders, Terry Butcher, Terry Fenwick, were strong men having a hard afternoon. Because the longer the game stayed level, the more certain it felt that this one player would, at some point, find a way through on his own. He was too good and too determined and far too motivated to be contained for 90 minutes. Something was coming. Nobody in the ground, not the players, not the referee, a Tunisian official named Ali bin Nasser, not the 100,000 souls baking in the stands, could have guessed it would arrive twice in 4 minutes, and that the two goals would be opposites of one another. And it would begin not with a moment of genius, but with the most shameless act of cheating the World Cup has ever witnessed. The 51st minute, Maradona played the ball into the England area and kept running. And the move broke down. An England defender tried to hook the loose ball back toward his own goalkeeper. The clearance ballooned up, hung in the bright air. and dropped between the onrushing Maradona and the tall, certain figure of Peter Shilton coming off his line to claim it. Shilton was bigger. Shilton's hands were higher. There was no way, by any law of physics or football, that a man a full head shorter should win that ball in the air. And he did not fairly. As they both rose, Maradona threw up his left fist, half hidden behind his own head, and punched the ball over Shilton and into the net. To the naked eye, in real time, it looked for all the world like a header. The England players erupted in fury, arms in the air surrounding the referee. They knew exactly what they had seen. But Ali bin Nasser, unsighted, with no video to consult and no help from his linesman, gave the goal. Argentina 1, England 0. It was plainly and simply a cheat, an illegal handball that should never have stood. Asked about it afterwards, Maradona gave the line that would follow him for the rest of his life. That the goal had been scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. The hand of God, the most notorious goal football has ever seen. And the diabolical half of the afternoon was complete. But the clock had only ticked 4 minutes, and in those 4 minutes, the same man was about to do something that would make the entire world forgive him, or try to. Four minutes later, he answered the cheat with a miracle, the 55th minute. Maradona collected the ball deep in his own half, near the touchline, with his back to England's goal and what looked like nothing on. He spun away from the first two challenges in a single movement, a pirouette in a phone box. And suddenly, he was facing the whole length of the pitch with the ball at his feet and acres of England in front of him. And then he simply ran. He ran past Peter Beardsley. He ran past Peter Reid, who chased him the whole way and could not get near. He went outside Terry Butcher, then cut inside, then left Terry Fenwick for dead. The ball never leaving his left foot, his low center of gravity letting him swerve at full speed where anyone else would have stumbled. 60 meters, 11 touches, half the England team beaten. And at the end of it, only Shilton, the goalkeeper who had been robbed minutes earlier, left to beat. Maradona feinted, dragged the ball around the diving keeper, rode one last desperate lunge from a recovering Butcher, and rolled it into the empty net. The Argentine commentator on the radio could barely speak, a torrent of pure disbelief. Barillet Cosmico, cosmic kite, from what planet did you come? To this day, it is voted again and again the greatest goal in the history of the World Cup. The same boots, the same man, the same 4 minutes, the hand of a cheat and the feet of a genius. But beating England was only the quarterfinal. And what Maradona did next would turn one extraordinary afternoon into the most complete one-man conquest the World Cup has ever seen. Argentina won that quarterfinal 2-1. England pulled one back late and threw everything forward. But the damage was done, and Maradona's afternoon, both halves of it, had settled the most loaded match of the tournament. And he was not finished. In the semi-final against Belgium, he scored twice more, including another solo goal almost as good as the one against England, dancing through 3 defenders as if they were cones. He had now decided this World Cup belonged to him, and there was nobody left who could argue. The final in the same furnace of the Azteca paired Argentina against a formidable West Germany. Sky blue stripes against white. West Germany were disciplined, relentless, and they man-marked Maradona out of much of the game, smothering him with numbers. For a while, it worked. Argentina led 2-0. But the Germans, as they so often did, refused to die and clawed their way level at 2 each with little time remaining. And then with the final tilting, Maradona did the one thing his markers could not legislate for. With a single moment of vision, he threaded a perfect pass through the heart of the German defense to release his teammate Jorge Burruchaga, who ran clear and slid home the winner. Argentina 3, West Germany 2, champions of the world. He had not scored in the final, and it did not matter because the whole tournament had been an act of will by one man. 5 goals, 5 assists, the Golden Ball as its best player. And a World Cup carried almost single-handedly from the first whistle to the last. We remember the hand, and we remember the genius, the cheat, and the masterpiece 4 minutes apart. Because together they are the truest portrait of him, flawed and divine in the same breath. The most human and the most magical footballer who ever lived. So now it comes back to you, the question we asked at the very start. Does the hand of God forever stain the goal of the century? Or do the cheat and the masterpiece belong together as the one true contradictory portrait of Diego Maradona? Drop your verdict in the comments, divine, diabolical, or both, and tell us which side you came down on. And if that question stays with you, you won't want to miss where Field and Tale goes next. We stay in 1986's long shadow and chase the oldest argument in the sport. Can one player really win a World Cup alone, or does the beautiful game always in the end belong to 11? Subscribe and ring the bell because that story is already on the table. Until then, this has been Field and Tale.